Douglas County Commissioner Kevin Van Winkle with former Staff Sergeant U.S. Army Howard Berger here, who is 101 years old, served in World War II, and was one of our amazing veterans we still have with us today from World War II. So I want to interview you, get to hear your story, and learn more about you in World War II, of course, and everything after that too. So maybe a good place to start is just, do you remember where were you on December 7th?
December 7th,
1941.
I was living in Brooklyn at that time. And the war started. My brother and I enlisted in 1942.
Okay.
I enlisted in the Army, and my brother enlisted in the Coast Guard.
Oh, okay.
And when he enlisted, when the paper was all ready to go, they found out they needed parental authority.
Oh.
So we left the armory. I signed my father's name. We walked in, and they accepted him right away.
You signed for your father's name. Oh. So during your time in uniform, what were some of the most, I guess, some of the exciting parts?
Well, I was assigned to Camp Stewart, Georgia.
Okay.
It was down there in 1942 and stayed there until 44. We went on maneuvers to Louisiana, and then we went overseas and went over on the Queen Elizabeth.
Okay.
In December 44, and the weather was terrible. And we finally made it to Scotland, and from Scotland we went to England, guarded the coast of England, and from there we went to Southampton, getting ready to go to the continent.
Mm-hmm.
And we were guarding an Italian prisoner of war camp in a park in Southampton. And it was an easy assignment because the Italians were very happy to be prisoners, and they didn't want to leave the camp, and they did their own cooking, so they really enjoyed it. And then we, from Southampton, we went through France, Belgium, through Aachen, Germany, and there the weather, of course, was frozen, terribly cold weather, and so we saw a lot of frozen Nazi soldiers in different positions while we were in Germany.
Okay.
And then we processed through various cities in Germany, and on our way, among the nicest area was the guarding the Rhine River. From there, we were heading towards Germany, Berlin. The war was practically over, so they diverted my organization, which was the 580th Anti-Aircraft Automatic Weapons, to Salzburg, Austria, to train for Japan. Harry Truman, president at that time, dropped 2 bullets over Japan, and that eliminated my tour to Tokyo, which was okay with us. And then we became the Army of Occupation of Austria.
Okay.
And at that time, everybody was leaving for the States because the war was over. And so you accumulate points from being in the service so many months, and so many months for overseas, you get extra points. And I was finally scheduled to go home on beginning of about the 10th of February.
Okay.
We had a party, the farewell party, the night before, and the next morning, I get a rap on the door because the train was leaving at noon. The captain wanted to see me. I went to see him. I thought he could say another farewell to me because he was at the farewell party. And he tells me he just received a TWX from the headquarters in Vienna saying that they would like to interview me for a position with the Army of Occupation as a civilian officer.
Oh.
So he said, but we can forget it, you want to go home, because everybody is rushing to go home after the war. I said, let me think about it. I go back to my room, everything was sent home, and I said, I'll never have an opportunity to see Europe again, and I'll have an opportunity to see Vienna, the capital of Austria. So I told him, I said, I'll go for the interview, I'll probably catch the next train for going back home. So he canceled my orders, and I get orders to go to Vienna, and eventually I'm interviewed, and they accepted me for a position. And this position was for it's a very strange position in the Army. It was for the liquor operations.
Oh.
In Vienna, and they didn't call it liquor at that time. And went for the interview, they accepted me, went back to Salzburg, and then eventually came back, received my honorable discharge, and became a government employee. And then I learned that job, and that was selling liquor up to the NCO officers clubs and the State Department people, and also to all the embassies surrounding Austria.
Okay.
And so it was an interesting job, and I was the assistant to the Class 6 officer.
Okay.
At those times, we didn't use the word liquor or alcohol. We used Class 6.
Okay.
And Class 6 was the terminology. So I was the assistant Class 6 officer, and when the captain in charge of Class 6, he left, I took over his job. And then several months later, the major came down to see me. He says, we want you to also take over the job as fiscal officer and budget officer. I said, I didn't think about budget. I just got out of high school. And he says, you got 3 weeks to go up. He's leaving in 3 weeks. And you go spend a half a day each day with him. So I did that. And then I went back to my job. And then the entertainment guy was leaving. So I went there for a temporary position. So I got a lot of on-the-job experience. And then eventually I ended up becoming the Deputy Special Services Officer in Vienna.
Okay.
And that was an interesting experience because our job was to provide morale and recreation for the troops.
The fun part.
Eventually, when the families came over, we included them for the support of their morale and recreation for families, children, as well as the spouses. And it was a very interesting tour in Vienna because the four powers were in control of the city. The French, British, English, and the Americans. And interesting about that aspect was every month, one of the countries would be in charge of Vienna. And they'd have a change of command ceremony on the first of every month, which included for example, they had the Russian band, military band. They play their music, and then their troops would march in front of the band, and the thousands and thousands of the Austrians would gather to watch the ceremony because it was quite impressive. Then the Americans would follow with their band and our troops. And it was quite a ceremony, and that would change every month because one of the powers would take over from the other. So that was an interesting aspect. And personal interest was I met my wife in Vienna, Austria.
Really?
And my wife, everybody assumed was Austrian, but she happens to be American. Not only American, she was from Colorado.
Oh, wow.
And so how did that happen? Well, Dorothy was born in a town called Siebert in Colorado between Burlington and Lyman.
Okay.
Small town, went to school at a one-room schoolhouse, eventually came to Denver, and joined the Marines.
Oh, she was a Marine.
She was a Marine, and after the war was over, she got out and joined the Foreign Service and was assigned to the embassy in Vienna, Austria. We met there at a cocktail party, and 68 years later, we were married 68 years. And then when the Russians agreed to let the Austrians have Austria, all the Allies had to leave. During my tour in Austria, I hosted a number of shows, like the Grand Ole Opry show for the troops. And also at that time, in 1949, Orson Welles
No way.
made a picture, making a picture in Vienna called The Third Man. Big favorite of mine, black and white, and I saw them make the movie and took him around to the Army installation. Very happy about that. And Joseph Cotton was the star of the movie.
Okay.
And he was a famous movie star at that time. And the Army was and Vienna was sponsoring the boxing championships. So all the troops throughout, Israel contenders for the championship, came to Vienna. And I invited Orson Welles to come, and he said no, he wasn't interested, but Joseph Cotton was. So I brought him down there, introduced him to the, must have 1,000 troops there watching the bouts. And he was very happy about that. And I had a lot of entertainers that we entertained the troops with, including the Harlem Globetrotters. So it was a great assignment. And then when we had to leave, 5 years later, that was 49, and I suggest everyone look at that movie, The Third Man. It's about the black market in Vienna at that time.
Oh.
Very interesting. And also interesting about the movie was the Third Man theme, also called the Harry Lime theme, because Orson Welles played the part of Harry Lime, who was an air good. And it's about Harry Lime dealing with a pharmacist in the Army pharmacy who was stealing penicillin, selling it to Harry Lime, who diluted the medicine, which resulted in a lot of people dying. Just before that, Harry Lime contacts his friend Joseph Cotton to visit him. So Joseph Cotton is a writer. He comes into Vienna. At that time, you get off the plane, everybody was considered a spy, so they checked him when he comes in, and everybody else, and they want to know where you're staying, how long you're staying, who you're going to see. And he said, I've been invited here by Harry Lime. And the MP said, Harry Lime, he was murdered a couple of days ago. We'll send you back on the plane going back to London. And he said, no, I'd like to see where it all happened. So he stayed over, and they told him there was 2 witnesses to the murder. So Joseph Cotton goes to the place where the murder took place, and there was an Austrian gentleman there, and they were discussing it, and the Austrian told him there were 3 witnesses. Well, one said 2 witnesses and 3, so he stayed over a little longer, and the story proceeds from then on with very interesting characters in it, and where the Russians and the French and the English get involved because they were working together. And that was that interesting program. But then 5 years later, when we had to leave, I get a call at my office and saying, Orson Welles wants to see the last changeover ceremony. So this time they didn't have one country replacing the other. They had all 4 bands for all the 4 soldiers of the countries marching. People hanging out of the ledges on the roof. It was an interesting sight. And he thanked me very much for it. That was my story in Austria. Well, since we had to leave, the Army established a missile base in Italy.
Okay.
And we transferred there. And the missile base, when the missile crisis was over, became home of the 1st of the 509th ABCT, which is the Airborne Combat Team. And had my stay in Italy. And one of the shows I hosted was, the great show was Bob Hope.
Oh.
Les Brown and the Band of Renown,
Yeah.
Hedda Hopper. And so we had some great entertainment for the troops.
Oh.
One outstanding event there, I was stationed in, well, we went from Italy, from Austria to Pisa, Italy, where our first headquarters was.
Okay.
And we held up the Pisa Tower for a couple of months there. And then from there, they moved the headquarters to Verona, Italy, which is the home of Romeo and Juliet story. And my friend Billy wrote about them, you know, Billy Shakespeare. And so a very famous actress, Olivia de Havilland, came over as part of the USO show, and hosted her there, took her to Juliet's tomb and Juliet's balcony, very appreciative. And there happens to be a picture that she, of Olivia de Havilland, with a little note of thank you to me.
Oh. What's it say here? Thank you. To Howard Berger.
Thank you for the visit. It was a lovely visit. She enjoyed it. You know, Olivia,
And
she was
with
a
many
star
thanks.
in Gone with the Wind.
Oh, yes.
She was a.
Oh, wow.
So it was interesting assignments that I had, and it was a pleasure helping the troops and their family. So I enjoy my job very much. Couldn't get to work early enough on Monday because it was such a fun job.
Oh.
You accomplishing things and self-satisfaction.
That's fantastic.
Then eventually they said they wanted the old timers to leave, so they gave us an incentive bonus to leave, bring in some young blood. So I retired in 1994
Oh, wow.
from Vicenza, Italy, and went directly to Naples. But Naples, Florida, not Naples, Italy,
Okay.
which most people think I went to. And then spent 6 months there, and then 6 months in Denver, and we commuted for a number of years. And we took 7 days or so to come to each area because we haven't seen America, and I was there 50 years in Europe.
Really? Wow.
I was with the Army, in and with the Army 53 years.
Okay.
And then, unfortunately, my wife passed away about 5 years ago, and had a wonderful Marine ceremony at Fort Logan. And she's waiting for me there, and I told her, postpone the wait a little longer. I'm having a good time.
Good.
And now I have a lot of friends visiting and
Yeah.
enjoying going to military events.
Good.
And then you guys contacted me, and be happy to see you guys. So I live in this home, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm still going on to 102 years old.
That's incredible. Incredible story.
And I'm still driving, by the way.
I thought I saw a car out front there. That's incredible. That's fantastic.
Yes.
If we could go back a bit, you said you stepped foot in France. Was your first time on the continent of Europe?
I landed in Scotland.
Scotland.
Right.
And then you went from Scotland,
England, through France and Belgium, into Aachen, Germany.
Okay.
And we guarded the Rhine River.
Was this, would that have been, when you went into Germany, that would have been after like the Battle of the Bulge?
Yes.
Okay.
That was in 1945.
Okay.
And I think it was about March, just around this time.
Okay. Well, maybe just if you recall, some of the feelings you had landing in France for the first time, entering Germany for the first time, as those battles were taking place just ahead or had just occurred just recently?
Well, it was quite an experience going into Aachen and seeing all those bodies, frozen bodies on the ground. And then, of course, we were prepared for any air attacks or paratroopers attacking German paratroopers. We went into one incident where we were driving through a forest, and a small plane, German spotter plane, we could have shot it down, but we were told don't shoot it because they may not have seen us. Evidently, they did see us because they started shelling us.
Oh.
And I remember I had to jump in a foxhole, not near my foxhole, somebody else's foxhole. He was already in there, so I jumped over him, scared the hell out of him, by the way. Then, before the war ended, we took over a German farmhouse, my company, and so I was going to have the opportunity of taking a hot tub bath, because the only way we were showering is out of our helmet. And so I remember I put the tub on the oven, I put wood in the oven, I took a sea ration can, which is like a Campbell soup can, and I filled it with gas to ignite the wood, and then to heat the water quicker. Exploded.
Oh.
And the gas came back in my body, on my leg and my hands, so I caught on fire.
Oh, goodness.
And the way to put it out, I ran out of the kitchen, and they had air raid shelter, and I moved the sand over my burns and put out the fire. And didn't feel anything at all until I got into my room to put on sulfadiazine from the medical kit I had. And then the shock set in, and then I felt it. Went to a tent hospital that day, and I was on a gurney waiting for other troops wounded, and they finally got to me in the evening. They were shooting me with morphine, and then I was in the operation room, and they had a captain and 2 nurses there, and they wanted to put me out because my leg was black. And I thought they were going to cut my leg off. And he said, we're going to put you out and clean you up. I thought they were going to cut my leg off, and I didn't want to let them do it.
Yeah.
So he says, well, if you want to stay up, you're going to feel a lot of pain. I said, that's okay. And so I held on to the gurney sides, and I cleaned me out, and it was painful.
Oh.
And so from that evening, when they finished, they put me in a tent with a bunch of other people on the ground, and I was in a gurney on a stretcher. And I remember I was in there, they gave me a shot of penicillin and 7 pills. And I finally got to sleep. It was and they woke me up again and said, another shot, 7 more pills. And I said, please let me sleep, please let me sleep. Sorry. And that happened a couple of times during the night until the morning. And then they moved me to a bomber that I think it was a B-25. They converted to an ambulance plane. And they flew me to Orly Fields in Paris. I was scheduled to go to England, and while on the terminal waiting for moving to England, an announcement comes over the loudspeaker. All burn patients will remain in Paris. All burn patients will remain in Paris. Well, I had no choice, but that was okay. And so I remember going to being treated in Paris for 2 months.
Oh, Paris.
On the way, after I was finished with my treatment, 1 month of the treatment, 1 month of recreation, going on a pass every day through Paris after the war. The French really appreciated the Americans then. I don't know if they do that much as now as well. So then now I have to return to my unit. And so the procedure is that you move to Nuremberg, Germany. That was the center point where the units would pick up their troop, return them to a particular unit. So I was there a couple of days, and it happened to be July 4th, where a USO show came to Soldiers Field in Nuremberg. And it featured Jack Benny, the great comedian, Ingrid Bergman, and several other stars. So I watched a great show, and after the show was over, I went backstage, which was not a backstage room, it was locker rooms, and got their autographs, and eventually went back to my unit. I was stationed in Berchtesgaden, which was Hitler's retreat.
Interesting.
And before I ended up going to Vienna during that time. So that was part of my life with the Army.
Okay.
And retired and in '94.
That's incredible.
And now I'm here.
So maybe in the very beginning, I wanted to ask you, so you were a young Jewish boy, living in Brooklyn.
Right.
The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Right.
You and your brother, was there...
Well, we were young then, and well, one incident while I was living in Brooklyn, I went to junior high school, 50. Coming back one day, I was a little late leaving the school, and I lived about maybe 12 blocks away from the school, and in those days we didn't have buses, we walked. And so on the way home, there was a playground and where they have swings and seesaws, and so I put my books down and got on the swing. And while I'm swinging, it was a beautiful day, I see a dirigible, white, beautiful dirigible, which is a cruise ship. And it was the Hindenburg. And the Hindenburg at that time was Hitler's masterpiece. And I saw on the fins of the dirigible the swastika.
Oh.
So I was saying to myself while I was swinging, I hope that thing blows up.
Yeah.
That evening, when I got home at 6 o'clock, the news broke, the Hindenburg exploded.
Wow.
It was a cruise ship, and so they had 64 passengers. And so a lot of people died, and there was a family of mother, father, son, and daughter. 3 of them died. The son survived. And I guess he was about 6 years old. And eventually, the son lived in Colorado.
Wow.
And where do you think he lived in? What city? Lived in Parachute, Colorado.
No way. Small town.
So I was hoping to meet him, but he died before I got a chance to make contact with him. Interesting part of my life. That was on May 7th, 1937.
Okay, yeah. And afterwards, what brought you here to Colorado? Was it you and Dorothy moved here to Colorado after?
Well, we went to Naples, Florida.
Naples, Florida.
And then we came to Denver, and we alternated. We lived in both places for a number of years.
Oh, that's nice. Summers here probably, and winters
and
there.
So arrived here in 95 and been here ever since.
Oh, fantastic.
And I love my place. People want me to go to assisted living. I said, well, I can. I want to stay here.
Yeah.
And I want to die here.
Still driving?
But I'm trying to delay that function.
Of course. Well, what other questions might we have, or what would you like to talk about? Do you want to talk more about Dorothy?
I met a lot of people here. I love to go to the theater. I love art and music. Picked up a good, interesting pieces of art. On the wall there is an oil painting, still life, which I bought in Italy, and the artist was the son of Benito Mussolini.
Oh, wow.
And Mussolini was, of course, with Hitler, and Romano Mussolini painted that. He was a kid when his father was hung by the partisans, and so he grew up in Rome and became a very fine jazz pianist.
Really?
In Italy, and then he became an artist as well. And so I found that painting at a restaurant in Italy and bought it.
There's a lot of interesting artwork.
And I have a lot of paintings that I picked up while we were in Europe. Most of the decorations around here, if it looks good, it was my wife that did it.
Now, she was you don't hear often about female Marines in World War II.
Yes. Well, the people question now the Marines today are fighters, but at the beginning, when they first entered joined up, they were administrators. And what they did was relieve the male administrators so they can fight. And that's what Dorothy did.
Oh.
And then when she joined the Foreign Service, she was with the State Department. So we had the best of both worlds in Austria because we were entertained with the State Department people and with the Army people.
Oh, fantastic. And married for 68 years.
68 years with Dorothy, right?
That's incredible.
I think we have to ask, just because you're so lucky to have had such a long life, do you have any advice?
Well, people ask me, what's the secret of my living this long? And the answer is, I can't tell you because it's a secret.